Welcome back. Okay, let's figure out how to pass data to our views. So I will open my routes file, or of course, remember, if you're using any editor like Sublime or basically any modern editor at this point, make sure you do shortcuts. So in the case of Sublime, Command-P, routes.php, and you're there. Anyhow, in the last lesson, we returned a basic string, which Laravel converts to a response. But yeah, in real life, you will be loading views like this. So imagine that you have some data you want to display on that page, and maybe this is coming from a database or a curl request or anything of that nature. Okay, so we will fetch the data. In this case, I'm just going to use a simple array. And let's do the hosts of the Laravel podcast. So Taylor, Matt, and myself. Now, we can pass data to our views in one of two ways. First, as the second argument, we can pass an array here. So for example, I could say, within my view, I want a variable called people, and we'll make that equal to this. Or, as you may know with PHP, if you do something like this, that will achieve the exact same end result. The compact function will create an array with a key of people and the value equal to whatever is associated with that variable. So that works. Another option would be to use this with method. So for example, I could say with people equals people. One final option is we can use what we call dynamic methods. So in this case, I want to pass through a key of people. So I could also do something like this, and Laravel will properly parse it. And yeah, either of these approaches are fine. There's no right or wrong. Just try to be somewhat consistent. In our case, why don't we do that compact approach? Okay, so this says load a view called welcome, and I want to pass to that view a variable called people and make that equal to this. So now we can go to resources, views, welcome, or once again, Command-P, welcome.blade. Much faster. Now, if we scroll down, let's filter through and display those people. Now, first, we'll tackle this with vanilla PHP, the basic standard way, and then I'll show you how to use Laravel's templating engine called Blade to tackle this. So yeah, if you come from the WordPress world, you might do something like this. For each people as person, and for each, yeah, we've done this thousands of times, right? And then maybe here, we'll echo out the person's name, like so. All right, let's boot up a server. PHP artisan serve. And if you have iTerm installed, you can command-click on the URL. All right, and sure enough, in the top left corner, we can see the output here. But now, what about this Blade approach? You know, in the past, we always had to write code like this in our views, but yeah, it's kind of gross to look at. PHP is a templating language, but it didn't really evolve to become an overly good one. So instead, we're not going to use Laravel's Blade engine. Here's what we do. I can get rid of all the PHP tags and replace it with @ symbol and then the name of the keyword, in this case for each. Next, I can get rid of that entirely because Laravel, behind the scenes, will build up the PHP fragment itself. And that's the way this works. Our views are loaded, they are compiled, they are cached, and then that cached file that contains generic PHP is actually what gets loaded. Okay, and now down here at the bottom, exact same thing. Replace this with @ symbol and then the keyword. Finally, for echoing out data, we can replace that with two braces, like this. So now we have more or less a direct conversion to Blade. And if I were to switch back and refresh, of course we get the same thing. Now, what you'll find is it's not that much more complicated than this. You will learn about layout files in a future lesson, but generally, Blade is very simple to use because it piggybacks off of what you already know. So for example, a simple if statement. If maybe empty people, once again, you don't do this, Laravel will do that automatically for you. So you can simply designate it with opening at if, and then you close it with end, and then the keyword. Okay, so if it's empty, there are no people. Come back, refresh. It is not empty, so of course we don't see it. But we can fix that. Let's empty this out. Come back, refresh, and now that works. Now, the exact same thing is true for like an else statement. So if I want to do something else, I can do that, something else here. And now if I come back and refresh, there you go. Now, Blade even includes a couple extra helpers. For example, in Ruby, you may be familiar with the fact that they offer an unless keyword. And that's basically equivalent to if not. But it sounds better, right? unless this value is true, then I want to do that. Well, with Blade, we can do that. Unless. And then down here, you would say end unless. And then in this case, we would say there are some people. And that's what we'll see in this case. Okay, so let's do a quick recap. When you want to pass data to a view, you can send through an array as the second argument to the view function. Now, it's possible you're learning from other sources as well. You're reading blog articles. So you also might see, just as an aside, you might see them do something like this, view make. In Laravel, this is what we call a facade. Now, you don't need to worry about this too much just yet, but just accept that these two are functionally equivalent. They're triggering the same bit of code behind the scenes. It's a global function. You're going to use it in virtually every controller, or routes file in this example, so it makes sense to make it available like this. Anyways, just an aside. So you can pass an array as the second argument, or you can use this with method. With people equals people, and you could continue chaining that if you wanted to. Really, though, if you go beyond one, it gets kind of sloppy. So another example, of course, would be to use an array to the with method. With people is people. As I said before, any of these approaches are fine. If you want my advice, I think this kind of looks good. But it's up to you. There's no right or wrong. Finally, you learn just the basics, the initial introduction to using Blade. And as you'll find, there's not that much to learn. You can take what you already know and quickly translate it over to Blade. And I think you'll see that stuff like this is far more enjoyable to write if we can make use of Blade. So anytime you want to echo out a value, no more stuff like this. You don't need to do that. Just do two braces, and that will, of course, translate to an echo statement. This is episode 4 of Laravel from scratch, and now we're going to learn about controllers. So I'm going to hit Command P to go to my routes.php file. And now right here what you see, this is inline. And this is really useful for small, simple, basic applications. Things where maybe you can build it in a few hours and it doesn't need that much structure. But what I think you'll find is for most projects, this probably won't do the trick. In real life, you'll probably opt for controllers. So let's figure out what that would look like. And in fact, why don't we just take this simple bit of code and translate it to a controller? Okay, so I'm going to create a new one, and I'll say, once again, when we make a GET request to the home page, and of course, don't forget, there is a POST request, there's a PUT request, a patch, a delete. If you're familiar with the concept of REST, you'll know how to get up and running. Otherwise, I'm going to teach you all of that. So let's bring it back to GET, and now, rather than referencing a function, I will reference a controller name. How about something like a pages controller? Now, we haven't created this just yet, but we will in a minute. Now, we can specify the method Laravel should call by using the @ symbol here. So in this case, this is the home page, so why don't we just call the method home? All right, so I will comment this out, switch back to Chrome, and we should see an error, right? If we try this out, yes, we do. And this is what an error looks like when you come across it in Laravel. So you get a little whoop screen, and it will tell you the line and the file where the error occurred. In this case, a pages controller does not exist, so we need to generate one. Now, where do controllers go? Well, they're going to be in your app, HTTP directory, and controllers right here. Now, notice you'll see one out of the box. This is sort of like your master controller. All other controllers will extend it. And this way we can pull in some common functionality that most controllers will make use of. Now, it's true we could manually create a new file, but because this is so common, Laravel can help us out. Let's run PHP Artisan, the command line tool, and if I scroll up, notice all of these generators here. Anything prefixed with make will create a file with a complementary stub. So in this case, take a look at this. Create a new controller class. Now, if you ever need more information, for example, does this accept any arguments or options? What you can do is say PHP Artisan help and then the name of the command, like this, make controller. All right, so all we have to give it is an argument with the name of the class. And then Laravel will grab that value, inject it into a little stub, and then create the file for you. All right, PHP Artisan make controller. And we're done. So now if I come back, you'll see we have this new file right here with a bit of boilerplate to get you up and running. So notice that we've namespaced this. Now I'll probably do a couple minutes on namespacing just to make sure we're all up to speed, but we'll do that in a future video. Next, remember how I told you all controllers will extend this parent controller? We're doing that. And now because these two are in the same directory, I could even remove that import. And in fact, in this little example, we're not making use of the request object just yet, which I will teach you about soon, so I can remove all of that. All right, so we said we wanted a method called home, so we'll create a method called home. Next, at this point, this is basically equivalent to what we would have had right here, which means we can grab all of this, delete this section entirely, and now if I come back, I can paste it in. All right, so that means if I come back to my browser and give it a refresh, yeah, we get the same thing as from the previous video, but now you're successfully using a controller. So let's see, if we want an About page, it's going to be the same flow. When we go to About, that's equivalent to a page, so we can put it in the Pages controller, because it's mostly static information. And then you go back to your controller, you create the method, About, and real quick, notice how I used a snippet there? Always do stuff like that. If you're manually writing this out, yeah, it's just kind of slow and it's bad for your fingers. Because you'll create methods nonstop, yeah, I have a little snippet here. You can create it in any editor at this point. In my case, it's MET, tab, and it will build that out. About. And now, once again, we could return a string, About page, or you can load a view. So let's come back, visit About, and there you go. It's working. All right, so I hope you're working along. Try this out, try to get comfortable with this entire workflow, and when you're ready, let's learn something new. Let's discuss layout files in this lesson. So I'm going to use Command P in Sublime Text to browse to my routes file, and we have two routes set up so far for Pages controller. So if we switch over to that, yeah, we can see our home route loads a welcome view, and now let's make the About view do the same. Return view About. Okay. So as you remember, in our resources views directory, we can add an About page here, about.blade.php. Okay, but now what about the basic boilerplate, like your HTML here? Now in this case, let's get rid of all of that style crap. But yeah, just in general, your HTML, your head section, do we have to do this and then just update things where necessary? About page? Nah, you don't have to do that. That would be really bad, right? Because every time you make a change to, for example, pull in a new style sheet, you would need to update that in each view, which is a terrible idea. So instead, we're going to use a layout file, or you might see these referred to as master pages. Think of them as basic boilerplate for your wrapping HTML, and then within each view, you only need to define subsets. Let me show you how this works. I'm going to create a new file, and we'll call this layout.blade.php. And now let's insert some HTML. And now down here within the body section, I'm going to add a new Blade directive called yield. So if I say yield content, and this can be anything we want, by the way. This can be yield foobar. It's just an identifier for a section that you'll create within your view. So in this case, this says, yeah, any section we've defined called content, I want to yield. So I want to take that section and insert it right here. Let's try it out. In my welcome view, yep, I no longer need any of this stuff. Now in this case, if I do want to keep the style sheet, yes, of course, you would put that right here. But anyways, I'd get rid of the entire thing, and now I would say I'm going to extend my layout file. Now I only have to create a section. So right here, if I want a section for my content, notice that keyword content, then I would say section content. And then stop designates the end of the section. Okay, so now I can say the welcome page goes here. And let's boot up a server and take a look. PHP artisan serve, command click on this, and here we go. So on my Mac, I can hit Command Option U to view the source, and you can see it was inserted directly where we expected. Now let's do the same thing for the About page. Right now, we are duplicating all of that wrapping HTML, but we're going to fix that. Back to our editor. I can copy some of this, switch over to about.blade, and get rid of all of the doc type and all of that. And now I can just say the About page goes here. Okay, so now if I refresh, we get the same thing basically, but we're not repeating ourselves over and over. So this means if we decide, yeah, I don't want to use this style sheet, I don't have to go to multiple views to remove it. I only need to browse to my main layout file, get rid of it, and now, if I refresh, it'll be reflected in every location, as you can see right there. Okay, so mostly that's the essentials of layout files. Just remember, you create a layout file, you yield content wherever it's necessary, and then your views can define individual sections, which will then be inserted at that location. So a common thing people do is you might have a yield footer section, and you might have a yield header section. So now imagine if, for whatever reason, your About page has a custom bit of CSS you want to include. Okay, well now you have a place to do that. Section header, and now you add your link right here. And the same is true for your footer. So maybe, yeah, you want to pull in a special script, or you just want to run some JavaScript. Well, now you can do that. You could say alert about page only. You get the basic idea where I'm going. But if I were to switch back, the home page doesn't load the JavaScript, but the about page did have a section for that, so we see it reflected here. And that's all there is to it.